My name is Timbo Threadgill, and this is Timbo Talk. I'd like to thank you for joining us for another episode. Most appreciative of the support as always. I'd like to thank everybody for the kind words, for the encouragement, for the support that you have shared, especially those who reached out after the last episode. I guess it was 2 episodes ago where I talked about a rough week that I had. So most appreciative of the support. Really appreciate all you folks who have shared the pod, who have liked, shared, subscribed, all that good stuff. Please keep that up. I've had a lot of people who have reached out and said really nice things and have said, I'm sharing the podcast. This episode was helpful. I really like this episode. But then I got like 8 5-star reviews. So if you like the pod, leave a brother a 5-star review. Additionally, producer Rob told me to do this. So blame producer Rob. I'm just playing Rob. But people who have shared nice things in DMs and texts and phone calls, all that, if you could turn that into a short review and leave that on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff, it would be much appreciated. We've been talking about this for seemingly the launch of the podcast. When the first time I really talked about it, but we've been talking about a Ask Timbo episode, and I'm happy to share that this is that episode. So these are questions that have been shared, that have been submitted, that producer Rob has shared as well. And I just wanted to jump into this. There is several of them. I don't know how long it's going to take as I start recording. So I might end up doing a part 1 and a part 2. But this is Ask Timbo. These questions have been gathered. They're random. I'll try to keep them to the best of my ability into categories that are kind of relevant to one another. But I don't know. I may jump around. I may babble a bit. So forgive me. Huge disclaimer, okay? I am a therapist, but I am not your therapist. I'm a therapist, but I am not doing therapy on the podcast. So I'm just answering these questions as I would if one of my boys or a buddy of mine or whatever asked me. This is not therapeutic feedback. This is not therapeutic advice, all right? If you need to speak with a therapist, go and consult with a therapist, okay? Don't take my answer to this question as, well, a therapist told me. No, this therapist did not. This therapist is just answering questions like I would if I was hanging out with the boys out back, or we were out at the bar having a beer, or shooting the breeze, or whatever it is, okay? So again, this is not quote-unquote official therapeutic feedback from a therapist. It's just Timbo answering questions, all right? Hope you guys enjoy it. And I'm not going to name drop, even though I should. I'm not. So the first question that was submitted came from a person who I will not name, but the question was, how do you make friends in adulthood, and how do you maintain friendships in adulthood? Really good question. So I think that the thing that we have to remember with making friends and with social skills is that with social skills, making friends, talking to people, just like anything else, the more you do it, the more you engage in these activities, the more comfortable you are when you do them. So there are times in which it can be really uncomfortable to strike up a conversation with a stranger for some of us, or to even approach an attractive young woman or young man, right? And to kind of engage them and talk to them. So the number one thing that I would suggest is getting outside of your comfort zone, talking to people, engaging with people, and getting more comfortable in your skin, and being more comfortable with who you are as an individual if you're struggling to make friends and engage with peers. Another thing that I would suggest folks pay attention to are common interests. So if there are things that you are into and things that you enjoy, those things are going to be easier for you to talk about, engage with people about, than if somebody talks to you about crocheting and you're not interested in crocheting. Okay, so prime example, if you are a big baseball fan, you might go to the sports bar when baseball's on and talk to some cats about baseball. You might join a softball league, right, and talk to individuals who are in a softball league about baseball, because maybe that's an interest that they have too. You might go to a comic book store if you're into comics and see what kind of conversations you can have with individuals who might be in the comic book store or who work there. You can also use some of these, environments, whether it's a comic book store or a softball team or even church, as a conduit for developing other opportunities to engage with folks, right? So the comic book store might have a comic night where they read comics, or they might have a game night, right? So if you frequent the comic book shop, then maybe you find out about some things that are happening within that community. So if you can find ways to engage with folks in different communities, especially those communities that are germane to your interests, germane meaning in line with your interest in the things that you are already enjoying, then there should be organic opportunities to develop relationships with individuals who are there for the same reasons. Social media can also be a good way to try and develop some new relationships. And that's not to say and there's nothing wrong with chatting with people online and chat rooms and social media and all those things. I said chat rooms. I just aged myself. I don't even know if those are still a real thing. But there are runners clubs. I was talking to a homeboy of mine, and he was like, "Hey, bro, I'm about to join one of these running clubs, and I don't even like running because I seen there's a whole bunch of cute girls on there, and I'm gonna start running to go meet some of these girls." And I don't like running. I'm not going to do that, but it is a good thought. So using social media to find out what kind of clubs, what kind of opportunities to engage with larger groups can present good opportunities for natural, organic opportunities to engage with folks and hopefully build some friendships. As far as maintaining relationships in adulthood, man, that's harder to answer. I always try to remember that friendship is a two-way street. Okay. And so if you remember what those scales look like, right? I'm holding two hands out, and if I put 3 weights on the left hand starts to go down, the right hand starts to grow up. In a friendship, in a romantic relationship, I think in all relationships, you're looking for balance. So the hands should both be about at the same place. That's not to say that there are not times in which you might be putting forth more effort than a friend of yours. And then vice versa, there's going to be times where your friends are putting more effort into maintaining the relationship than you are, right? So we have to be cognizant of those things and be aware of them. But at the end of the day, all you can do is control what you can control. I think it's important, or at least something that I try to do with my friends is, schedule outings, whether that's going out for happy hour, meeting for a dinner once a month, once a quarter sometimes, once a week. It just depends on what the schedule looked like and what the relationship is like. One of the hardest lessons that I had to learn in adulthood is that sometimes relationships change. Sometimes we outgrow one another. I've had friends that I have bent over backwards for, that I have, sacrificed so much for in various settings and situations, that have just essentially drifted away. And that is something that happens. There are times when that happens and it's intentional. There are times when it happens and it's not intentional at all. It's just one of those things where people just kind of drift away from one another. And that's kind of part of growing up. So again, I would say focus on control what you can control. Be the friend that you want to be. And if things are out of balance, then pay attention to that. That's probably something we could discuss in longer form on the pod at some point. Next question. Well, this question is about dating and how you go out on dates. And a lot of what I just said about friendship probably applies to how do I date and how do I meet new people. The other thing that I would suggest people do is shoot your shot. Shoot. Okay? I had this dude who I knew back in the day. This is what he used to say. He used to say, I talk to a lot of girls. I try to talk to a lot of girls. Because the way I see it, if I try to talk to 100 girls and 10% of them say yes, that's 10 of them. Hey, man, that's a good amount of people that I could try to talk to and try to potentially date. Listen, I don't know if that's my strategy. I can be a little shy, but shoot. If you are approaching women or men, and you are shooting your shot and you're asking them out, hey, can I ask you for a cup of coffee? Would you like to meet up and maybe grab lunch or something? Those things, at least if you're doing them more often, you're going to have greater success than if you see a cute girl or a cute dude and you approach them one time in 2 months. oh, that girl's cute. I'm going to try to ask her for a phone number, ask her if she's single. Then she says she's not single. And then you don't talk to nobody for 2 more months after that. No, you got to stay active. You got to be, on your horse. And dating is not easy. Dating is complicated, and it seems like it's getting more and more complicated the older I get. But, that's just how it is. You got to adapt and rise up. Next question. This is a good one. How do you know when a relationship is worth fighting for versus when it's time to walk away? Woo, a lot of variables to look at there. I think the big things that I would say to focus on is the value of the relationship, the significance of the relationship. And again, I used the scale metaphor earlier, right? What's the balance in the relationship look like? Is this a two-way street? Are you sacrificing and putting in the effort, and is that being matched by another party? Are your shared interests or the things that you do still consistent with the type of life that you want to live? I've had individuals who I've talked to about friendships and about relationships, and it can be really, really difficult for individuals to recognize, hey, man, I've outgrown this person. Or, hey, you know what? The things that I used to do, whether that is, I've run this to a lot of I've run into this a lot with people who I know who are in recovery or who are working on sobriety. So somebody will say something like, this person was 10 toes down from me, always. There were times where I had nothing and they gave me the shirt off their back. They made sure that I had some money to get something to eat. We were on the streets and we were using together, but that was my man 50 grand. Okay. So now that same person is working on sobriety, and the friend who was 10 toes down for him is maybe not. And so that leads to a lot of conflict in the relationship. And those dynamics can be difficult to manage because if you're trying to manage sobriety, if you're trying to get sober or maintain being sober, it can be difficult to engage with individuals who are still using. And that dynamic of where do I cut this off and how do I maintain this relationship while also having healthy boundaries can be really difficult for people to manage. It can be also difficult when the relationship is romantic, right? So when you talk about history with your significant other, when you talk about the things that happen that can have a significant impact on that relationship, whether that is infidelity or difficulty with raising children or difficulty with friend groups or families. These are all stressors that can impact our relationship. And so you have to really take a long, hard look at how that relationship is serving you. Is the relationship still something that is serving you in a positive way? And that's not to say that every friendship or every relationship is always going to be good, is always going to be positive, is always going to serve you. There's going to be times where it sucks and it's difficult and it may feel tiresome, but it should not always feel tiresome. It should not always feel so taxing. I like to feel better when I'm done hanging out with my friends. I like to feel refreshed and feel good about myself. But something I pay attention to is if I'm walking away from a engagement and I'm feeling drained, and I don't mean my normal, I need to recharge and be by myself trained, but I mean I'm feeling drained and almost anxious and just off, right? And if I recognize that that's happening consistently when I hang out with the same friend group or the same friend, then my natural response is to maybe spend less time with that friend or with that friend group, right? Or at the very least, question why I'm feeling that way. And if I can really directly pinpoint some specific things that are bothersome, maybe I'll talk to that friend or that friend group about that and see if it can change. Yeah, there's a lot of different things that you can look at, and that's probably worth a deeper dive as well. Next question. What's one thing that you wish people understood about maintaining healthy boundaries in friendships or family relationships? Somebody asked me about this earlier this week, and I'll probably do a longer form episode on it here in the coming, weeks, months, years, however long we do this podcast. With that being said, a couple of quick things related to healthy relationships in friendships and in family relationships. Number one, your boundaries are yours. You don't have to have anybody sign off on them. You don't have to have anybody agree with them or say, hey, I think this is a good boundary. It does not matter what anybody thinks about your boundaries but yourself. Maybe your significant other, maybe your children, if you have, specific boundaries, specific to your family. And that's, again, specific to the family union. I was talking to a dear friend of mine, and he has young kids. And, he was at a family gathering. People started arguing. He looked at his wife. His wife looked at him and said, okay, we're out here. And they grabbed their kids and they left. Because for them, a big boundary is we don't put our kids in situations where they might be uncomfortable. And when people get to yelling and people are drinking and all that, these kids get uncomfortable, so they take off. He doesn't have to explain that to his family. He doesn't have to explain why he's leaving. All he has to say is, hey, it was good to see you guys, and we're leaving. Okay? So your boundaries are yours alone. You don't have to explain them to anybody. Another thing that you have to remember is that boundaries have to be worked on. Just like saying no, it can be really uncomfortable to, first of all, establish your boundaries, but also to maintain them. So you have to do, like with anything else, you have to practice. You have to put the time in. And the more that you do it, the easier that it'll get. But boundaries can be formed for some people. And in some family dynamics, it could be very, very different. Some families don't have boundaries. And when the first family member decides that they're going to, put some boundaries up and put their foot down about some things, it can be met with a whole lot of frustration, rejection, even anger. So boundaries have to be worked on. They're yours, your own. The other thing that I would say about boundaries is they're something that we do to keep ourselves safe. Okay? So if we were talking about safety in any other sense, I would say don't put yourself in harm's way or do things that don't make you feel safe just to make somebody else be comfortable or just to make somebody else happy. It ain't worth it. Boundaries will definitely be revisited in a future episode. That was a really good question. Ooh, another really good question. How do you rebuild trust after it's been broken? Woo, man, people are not going to like what I have to say about this. Rebuilding trust is amongst the most difficult things I think that we have to work through in friendships and in relationships, romantic relationships, that is, as human beings. I have been wronged by people more times than I can count. And there's plenty of times where I've probably deserved it and I've probably earned it. But it can be earth-shattering when someone betrays your trust or someone lets you down, or someone is not faithful in a relationship, right? Any of these things that kind of make us feel hurt and violated. I found personally that when it comes to rebuilding trust, the person has to go so far above and beyond that very few have been able to rebuild that trust. And even those who have rebuilt that trust, there's still that sense of doubt, at least for me, just being transparent. There's still that sense of doubt about what things are going to look like moving forward, about whether or not this person can be completely trusted, because they show me that they have the capacity to hurt me, to do me wrong, to disregard my feelings in the way that I treat them, in the way that our relationship has been for whatever reason that leads to that violation of trust. So, when people break my trust, when people hurt me, it's not that I don't forgive them. I'm big on forgiveness. It's the believer in me. I will forgive you, but it is almost impossible for me to forget. In my romantic relationships, I have found that once trust is broken down, it's just a matter of time for me until the relationship ends. I wish that wasn't the case sometimes. I wish I could do a better job of that, but I've talked about this in other episodes of the pod, but my gut and we are in lockstep. And if my gut tells me something is off, that's how it is. So when trust is broken, especially when my gut has told me this trust is broken and then it's confirmed, it's really difficult for someone to gain that back. But if you're going to work to regain trust, you got to humble yourself. You have to recognize that this is going to be an ongoing process. You have to recognize that you're going to have to make probably bigger sacrifices than you have made before. And you're probably going to have to do some things that you're uncomfortable with. Okay. There are many, many instances of people doing things in relationships that I maybe thought were not healthy or not things that I would do in my relationship. But when trust is broken and some of those things are reintroduced into relationships as a way to maintain trust or rebuild trust, I think that the violating party has to respect that. I'm not big on looking at your significant other's phone, for example, but there are situations when trust is being rebuilt where your partner might say, hey, I would like you to leave your phone unlocked. And you have to consider, again, if you're the person that violated the trust, if you are willing to do something like that in hopes of rebuilding that trust in that relationship. And that was just the first kind of example that came to life, but that looks different for everybody. But you got to be open to doing whatever the hurt party wants to do to try and rebuild that trust. There's a time where enough is enough. But especially initially, we got to humble ourselves and be open to whatever that looks like if that relationship is important enough to us to try and rebuild or maintain. Next question. Is it possible for two people to grow in different directions but still stay together? Yeah, I think so. I think that as it relates to both friendships and romantic relationships, there are times when we may grow apart, or when things might change, the dynamics between us may change, or our friendship may change, or even our priorities in a romantic relationship may change. But that does not mean that the relationship has to end. There are many, many people who have had different callings, whether that is a calling to change careers, have children, get healthy, stop drinking, be more active in their church, right? These things can be drastic changes in a relationship or in a friendship, but it does not mean that the relationship has to end. I talked about sobriety a bit ago. So I may have a good friend and say, hey, man, I know we go out to the bar and drink, every Saturday. We go to happy hour on Wednesday and we watch football on Monday. We always drink beer, but I don't drink anymore. That can go one of two ways. Some relationships are probably going to end or deteriorate at that point. Other people say, okay, no problem. I'll come watch football on Monday and we won't drink. I'll come hang out on Saturday and we won't drink. Instead of going to the bar on Wednesday, let's go to the batting cages or let's go to the driving range or whatever it is. Same with romantic relationships. Now, there are bigger changes, bigger shifts that can definitely impact the way we navigate relationships. I brought up children a second ago. Children is a big one. If you get married to somebody and you guys agree that you don't want to have children, and then 5 years into the relationship, or the marriage, either you or your wife or vice versa says, hey, I really want to have children. I could definitely see how that might end the relationship, depending on what that looks like. It's a case-by-case scenario, but from a general perspective, yeah, absolutely. People can grow in different directions but still stay together. I think the most important thing is communication, making sure that the communication is rock solid, and also ensuring that there are still shared interests and still things that you can do together. That's a really good question. I like that one. I will move out of the relationship kinds of questions to another area. So next question. This is kind of more parenting related. How do you stay calm when your child's behavior pushes every single one of your buttons? Ooh-wee. This sounds like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. My kid is a button pusher and she knows what she is doing. So this one hits close to home. I remember one time my kid was getting on my nerves. I was trying to sit on the couch and unwind after work, and my kid was all up my butt. And I paused and I looked at her and I said, hey, do you know what annoying means? And she said, yeah. I said, do you know what it is to be annoying? And she says, yeah. And I go, are there kids at your school who are annoying? And she said, yeah. And I said, and do you get annoyed when they get on your nerves? And she said, yeah. And I said, so why do you sit up here and annoy me and get on my damn nerves? And her face was like, I don't know. But she absolutely knew what she was doing. And that's kind of how my child rolls sometimes. Number one is staying calm when your child's behavior pushes every single one of your buttons. If you can do it, okay, tag in your partner. One of the things I'm praying for, Lord, to send me a good wife so I can tag somebody in when this child is getting on my damn nerves, because it happens like that sometimes. So, number one, if your child's getting on your nerves, if you're frustrated, tag in your partner. Take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, go out back for a minute, go for a quick walk, take a shower, okay? Do whatever it is that you kind of do to reset and gather yourself. If you don't have the ability to do that, it's going to be difficult to navigate the waters to the best of your ability. We don't always have the opportunity to take a minute to cool down, to reset, to go for a walk or whatever it is. And so one of the things that has worked really well in my home, again, I'm a single father, is I'll just tell my child, hey, listen, honey, I had a really long day. I'm trying really, really hard, okay, to not have a moment here, but I need you to help me out. And sometimes my child responds really well to that and will kind of stop giving me a hard time. Other times she looks at me and I could see her little wheels turning in her head and it's like, I don't give a damn. This is what I'm going to do. And that sucks, but it happens. But, just be honest with your kids about where you're at. Another thing that I do in my home is I will apologize to my kid. I will acknowledge my shortcomings, especially when I'm frustrated or having a moment or it's been a bad day. There's been times where I've gone back into my kid's room a couple of minutes after we had a moment. I said, hey, listen, I know I yelled a little bit ago. I was really frustrated. I asked you to do this 17 times. You didn't listen to me. I'm tired from work. It's not an excuse for yelling, but I just want to apologize because I try not to yell and handle things like that. And that makes it easier to kind of move on. I think it helps my child to be empathetic to where I'm at and to be more understanding of why I act the way I act sometimes. Again, it's not an excuse. It's not a pass to act that way. But for me, that is something that has worked very well. The other thing is you have to make sure that you're getting your self-care in. You have to make sure that to the best of your ability on an overall level, you are putting yourself in a position to put your best foot forward. Okay. So exercise, go for walks, do meditation, do things that are going to keep yourself regulated and balanced so that in those moments when your child is pushing all of your buttons, instead of escalating to a 98, maybe we're escalating to like a 68 or a 78, because that's probably a little easier to manage than if we're about to flip all of our shit. Pardon my language. Next question. What is one thing that you think everybody should make time for every day? I think that is probably a question that is best answered for individuals because I think we all look a little bit different and that can look different for each and every one of us. I do think it's important to try and prioritize at least one thing that makes you feel good or one thing that you enjoy every single day. Life can be a bit of a grind, work, parenting, relationships, inflation, things being expensive. All those things are going to impact the way that we live day to day and how we manage things day to day. So whether that is yoga or playing guitar or jujitsu or having a beer a night or having a little bit of time by yourself, if you have 6 kids, whatever it is, I do think it is important that we prioritize at least one thing for us to do for ourselves every day. And that can pay off in big ways, I think. For me, those things are probably time for prayer, time for myself to just be by myself and reflect. People can be a little overwhelming and my work can be overwhelming. I also get into the steam room at the gym like pretty much every day. And that is kind of like my safe space and my sanctuary. And so for me, those are things that work well for me. Next question. What's a piece of advice that you would give an 18-year-old? Man, I got a lot of stuff for the young adults to transition as youth. I love working with that population, and that's a really good question. I think if there was any piece of advice that I could give an 18-year-old or my younger self, I would tell them to don't be afraid of time commitments. I know that for me, when I was 18 years old, 4 or 5 years felt like an eternity. And in retrospect, 4 or 5 years flies by. So if there's something that you want to do or something that you want to pursue, and it seems like a big time commitment or it seems like it's going to take too long, don't worry about it. Just get on the horse, start the ride, and you'll be at your destination before you know it. It's probably the best advice I have for, maybe not the best, but that's a piece of advice that I would give an 18-year-old. Next question. How do you balance honoring your child's independence while also trying to keep them out of harm's way? That's a complex one. I think I'll start by saying that every generation that raises children looks at the generation that their children are growing up in and thinks that it's significantly worse than their generation. Problems are bigger. Things are a little more intense. Things are more complex, more complicated, all those things. I think for me, as I look at parenting, internet access, social media, harm is a fingertip away. And for me, people my age, I'm 38, people my age are unique. And that's because we experienced the analog world, but also saw the transition into this more digital world. So we see things through both perspectives. I think that for me as a parent, I try to honor the autonomy of my child. Autonomy of my child. And autonomy, just being, their ability to make choices, make decisions on their own, in an age appropriate way. My kid is 11. So as she gets older, I'm going to give her more autonomy to make more choices. I try to give her autonomy now. But the biggest thing that I have learned is that, at least for me, my biggest lessons have come amidst failure, mistakes, dealing with the consequences of bad choices. Those are the lessons that stuck. And so I think for any parent, caregiver, adult, you want to avoid your child experiencing, the lows of the lows that you've experienced. But part of the insight and awareness that we gain as adults to parent and look back and say, do this and don't do that and do this and go right instead of left and go up instead of going down. All these things are based upon our experiences when we were given the freedom and autonomy to do things in the way that we thought was best at that age. So it's a hard thing. I do think it's important to, like I said, honor the autonomy of your young people the best that you can, and also to have open communication with them. You want your child to be most comfortable coming to you and talking to you about things rather than their dumbass friends who are just as dumb as they are, another 11-year-old. So I'd much rather have my child come and talk to me about something than to go to their peers or, even their teachers. Come talk to me first and let's figure it out together. So it's a hard thing, but those are the biggest pieces of advice that I would probably share on that. What is the most simple and efficient thing that you do when feeling anxious? I have struggled with anxiety for most of my life. I've shared a story with many, many people that I didn't know that anxiety was a word until I was maybe 13, 14. I thought that everybody just felt like that. So I can't remember a time in my life when I didn't experience some level of anxiety. For me, it is much more manageable in adulthood. I am a big believer in medical cannabis. That's something that has been very helpful for me. But, you can't, use cannabis to medicate when you're feeling anxious all the time. The most effective things for me outside of using cannabis for managing anxiety is just increasing my self-awareness, acknowledging when I'm feeling anxious, acknowledging when I start to feel anxious, and paying attention to my triggers. I can be strategic in managing the way that I live my life and avoiding certain triggers that can make my anxiety spike. I also think that it is very important to stay consistent with a routine. So for me, keeping my routine consistent is a way that I avoid triggering my anxiety. Exercising and getting into the gym regularly is also something that helps me to keep myself regulated. And that's not just specific to anxiety, but that's managing stress, anxiety, depression, things that are frustrating me, whatever it may be. So being consistent with the routine and especially exercising are probably the biggest things that have contributed to being able to manage my anxiety. At least me personally. Breathing exercises in the moment, and also just taking a step back and acknowledging, like, okay, I'm feeling anxious, and that's okay. We're going to do a little bit of breathing work, calm down a little bit, and then let's come up with a plan on, figuring this out and working through things from there. Question, and this is getting long. I'm definitely going to have to do a part 2 because producer Rob going to be pissed when this episode is super long. That he has said it. Appreciate you, Rob. Next question. How can you support someone who refuses to seek help for mental health or substance abuse struggles? That's a tough one. I think that the thing that we have to remember here is that you can only control what you can control. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So if you're trying to support someone who's struggling with their mental health or with substance abuse, I'm a big believer in try, and try some more. I will bend over backwards to try and help somebody who's struggling with their mental health or with substance abuse or really with anything else. But I will not do that at the expense of my own mental health or well-being. I had a friend recently who went through a really rough breakup and reached out to me. This wasn't maybe within the year, but not super recently. But this friend reached out to me after going through a really difficult breakup. And he was really struggling with depressive symptoms. And he'd been drinking more than usual and just, was not doing well. And heartbreak sucks. One of the worst things I've ever experienced is heartbreak. I wouldn't wish it upon my worst enemy, but it's part of life sometimes. So he reached out to me and we had a long conversation about things, and I listened and validated his feelings and gave him some encouragement. And I did some research and I found a couple of different agencies where he could walk in and do an intake and start seeing a therapist. And so I told him, hey man, reach out to these places. They're in your zip code. They're close. Give them a call, schedule an intake. You should talk to a therapist about some of this. Our first engagement like this was 11 p.m. on a Thursday night, whatever. So we had a long conversation. About a week later, midnight, he reaches out. Hey, man, I'm not doing well. I've been drinking. I'm still struggling. And so we had a similar conversation. And one of the first things I said was, did you reach out? Did you schedule an intake? No, I haven't gotten around to it yet. Okay. About a week later, same thing. He reaches out to me late at night. The first thing I said that time was, did you reach out and schedule an intake? No, I didn't. So I told him, I said, hey, man, I'm happy to support you and I want to support you and I love you, brother. But you have got to help yourself. I cannot continue to be the person who you reach out to in the middle of the night when you're having a tough go of it. Now, if he had reached out to me and said, yes, I reached out, I scheduled my intake, I started therapy, or I have an intake next week, or whatever it is, I probably would have been more open to engaging with him. But again, I have to protect my own mental health, my own well-being, my own energy. And I think that that's something that some of us as helpers struggle with. I know it's something that I've really struggled with. And again, this is hitting that boundary bell. Ding, 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 ding. Boundaries. Ding, ding, ding. So that's telling me that we probably need to do a full episode on it. But it's complex and it's complicated, but you can only do so much. And again, try and try some more. But you want to see some fruit of that person's effort, of some fruits of their labor. And especially, we have to remember with substance abuse, it is such a difficult journey for people who are struggling with substance abuse. And for those of us who don't struggle with substance abuse, it's like, well, if you don't want to drink, then just don't drink. You want to stop smoking crack, then just stop smoking crack. If you want to stop gambling, just stop gambling. You want to stop having sex, well, stop having sex. When you struggle with addiction, your brain is wired differently, and it's not as easy as just stopping. So if we're not aware of that as helpers or as family members or partners or whatever it is, we can perceive that a whole lot differently than the reality of the situation is. So I do encourage folks to be patient. The other thing that I'll say about trying to help someone who struggles with substance abuse or with their mental health is, God forbid that person dies or something terrible happens, you will forever, I don't want to say you will, I don't want to guarantee it, but I know for me, I have looked back on some of those relationships when I've lost someone who struggled with their mental health and their substance abuse. And the thing that racked my brain continually was, I could have done more. Why didn't I do more? Why didn't I pick up the phone that third time they called and they hadn't scheduled their intake or whatever it was? There's nothing in the world when that person is gone that will make up for that. And when that person's gone and gone for good, you'll look back and wish that you had done more, usually. Even if you've done absolutely everything that you could have, you'll still look back and wish that you had done more. So again, try, and try some more, but not at the expense of your own mental health or well-being. I'm going to do one or two more and probably wrap this until we do a part 2 at some point. This is a pretty good question, even though I probably touched on it a little bit. What are 3 small daily habits that have a big impact on your mental well-being? I talked about this a little bit earlier, but going to the gym, getting into the steam room, and having a little bit of time for myself. Those are the biggest things for me. And again, that looks different for everybody, but figure out what works for you and do it. How do you cope when everyone in your friend group seems further ahead than you are? I think a short on this about ditching timelines. That's my biggest piece of advice for that is we have to stop comparing ourselves to others. Your journey is unique. Your variables are unique. Your struggles are unique. So the things that you experience when you're trying to get your first real job, graduate college, get an apartment, buy your first car, whatever it may be, as a young adult, your journey is going to look different than that of your peers. Your college experience is going to look different than those of your peers if they're on a full ride scholarship and you're working. Trying to get a new car or your first car is going to look different for you if you're working part-time at Jimmy John's and your best friend's parents say, hey, we'll give you $3,000 and you come up with the rest and you can get a car with that. Okay. So if you compare, what is happening with other people, especially your friends, it can be very discouraging. But when you instead focus on your journey and what you have to take care of in giving yourself credit for the progress that you make, you're probably going to feel a whole lot better about the progress that you're making. So comparison is the thief of joy. Don't compare yourself to others. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Worry about what's happening in your lane and being as efficient and effective as you can in pursuing the things that you want to do on your own timeline. Last question on our first Ask Timbo episode. How did you decide that you wanted to be a therapist? So, I'm not sure when I first decided that I wanted to be a therapist. Most of my life, even as I remember as far back as 7th, 8th grade, friends talking to me about something going on or kind of venting to me about things that are happening in their families. And I just kind of enjoyed it, listening to people and say, hey, why don't you try this? Giving advice, quote unquote. But I've also kind of always been the person in my friend groups where, I just listen. I'm there for my friends. I'm there for my loved ones. I listen to them and I try to make them feel better. I'm, again, annoyingly optimistic. So that's just kind of part of my DNA. I remember I took my first psych class at Glendale Community College just after I graduated high school. Gauchos. And I took a Psych 101 class and I fell in love. It was the first psych class that I'd ever taken and I really enjoyed it. And I remember going to my advisor and she's like, you think you want to major in psych? We had a conversation about it. And she said, just remember, if you want to do anything with a degree in psychology, you have to get a master's degree. And 17-year-old me, I started college at 17. I graduated super young. 17-year-old me was like, I'm not going to graduate school. I might not graduate college, period. So that sounded like too much to me. So I ended up majoring in comm. And I ended up deciding many, I think when I was 30 or so, that I was going to go to graduate school. And I started grad school because I was teaching at a charter school. And the guidance counselor at the time did not have a master's in school counseling. So she said, hey, Tim, I'm going to go back to school. You should go back to school, too. I think you would be a really good guidance counselor if you want to stop teaching one day. And I thought about it and I was like, hey, yeah, that'd be pretty cool. That'd be cool to be a guidance counselor. I would enjoy that. Maybe I'll pursue grad school. And the more that I chewed on it, the more I thought to myself, I don't want to get stuck in education if I decide that I want to do something different. And that's when I kind of looked into getting my master's in counseling. And that's when I started my journey. So my master's is in professional counseling. I covered, everything. Marriage and family, substance abuse, working with adolescents, group therapy. There's really not a whole lot that I'm not comfortable doing at this point in my career. There's a few things that I won't touch, but I'm pretty comfortable doing any kind of therapy and working with any individual pretty much on improving anything. So that's kind of how I got into therapy. My program was just under 3 years. So there was 2 years of coursework, and then we did a 10-month practicum. And I've talked about that as well, doing my practicum at the prison and what that journey was like. So, yeah, that's that. This was fun. I think the next time that I'll do a Ask Timbo episode, that I'll probably go over to Producer Rob's and do it over there so that there's a little more back and forth. I think that there's some more conversations to be had in answering some of these questions. But also, I'm pretty sure this is the longest ep that we have recorded yet. So I hope that there's some good information there. I hope that it's entertaining. I'm looking forward to doing the next one. I appreciate your support as always, guys. Thank you for tapping in. Please like, share, subscribe. Tell your mama, tell your cousin, tell your baby daddy, tell your best friend, all that good stuff about Timbo Talk. My name is Timbo Radio, and this is Timbo Talk.